From the News Channel 5 network, this is Inside Politics.
Hello, everyone. I'm News Channel 5's political analyst, Pat Nolan. Welcome to Inside Politics. Politics never takes a holiday. For Republicans here in Tennessee and across the country, there sure are the problems in Washington for the Trump White House and the failure of the GOP-controlled Congress to pass a new health care law. But here in Tennessee, prospects look fairly bright for the party to hold its domination in state government and in our congressional delegation in the 2018 elections. Here to talk about national and state politics from a GOP perspective is political analyst Scottie Nell Hughes. Scottie, thanks for coming on the show again.
Thanks for having me.
Vice President Mike Pence was in town late this week to help the party raise what I think is a record amount at his annual Statesman's Dinner. It seems to be the best of times for the GOP in Tennessee, but you detected perhaps a little unsettling stuff in terms of Tennessee Republicans when they all got together in the same room.
Well, first of all, the 2017 Statesman's Dinner was a huge success, for Scott Golden. He did an excellent job. It was a sold-out crowd, and it was a great way to show the Vice President how wonderful Nashville really is. You have to realize right now you have the RNC is holding their fall meeting in Nashville at the end of August. We have the Vice President in Nashville. We had President Trump himself just a few months ago here in Nashville doing a rally. So it's obvious that right now the RNC is looking at Nashville, and I'm hoping this is kind of a good sort of prequel for possibly a 2020 bid for the RNC happening here in this state. And it's good. I think a lot of it is owed to the fact that we are so solidly red within our state and with our legislature.
But within the room, you had at least 5 Republican candidates are going to be running against each other in the primary for governor next year. Did you begin to see the lines drawing up and people looking at each other saying we're going to be going against you?
Absolutely. The governor's race was definitely on the ballot. People were high in discussion, people realizing that I think coming off of last year's election year with President Trump and seeing the 17, the primary, and the drama that went into that, people are kind of expecting the same thing to happen as you have that kind of diversity amongst the GOP that will be on the ballot. You're looking at Bill Lee, very much a conservative Christian evangelical, but just hired Chris Devaney, establishment Republican, former GOP chair, all the way to you've got Randy Boyd, who is well organized last night. In fact, of all the candidates, I think Randy definitely had the most troops on the ground. In fact, the joke was, see if you can get up 2 escalators without getting a Randy Boyd sticker on you, you get a prize. So he definitely had his ground game going. May Beavers was definitely trying to work the room as the conservative Tea Party individual, which takes a little bit of Bill Lee's crowd. And then, you know, kind of right in the middle, you kind of have the rest of them kind of falling into place and trying to get for kind of scavenging. Diane Black, who just recently announced she was actually a candidate that you started seeing the yard signs coming out at the end of the event, and people talking, and obviously Vice President Pence made a great recognition.
Maybe she just got him back from the printer.
You know what? Obviously, and then a great turnaround on that side of it. Good logo for her. But it was interesting because the Vice President Pence made sure that he pointed out that she was chair of the Budget Committee, which is very important to the president's agenda, making sure that the budget approves everything the president wants to do.
Going back to Washington, the Wall Street Journal is reporting and other media outlets that there's a special grand jury that's being convened in Washington by the special counsel. Robert Mueller is going to look specifically at the Russian involvement in the 2016 election, any involvement that the Trump campaign or the president may have had in that. The president has sometimes reacted quite vociferously about this. Are we going to see the fact that this grand jury is going to look specifically at that, and it looks like at his specific finances? Are we going to see a lot more tweets or the president making some pretty harsh statements again?
I doubt it. I think the president right now has Jay Sekulow, who's advising him on the outside. He obviously has a good in-house counsel as well who's advising him what to do. The only thing I have to say is President Trump on this has called this a witch hunt, and it looks like the witch hunt is going after his son right now. So I'm wondering, he's very protective of his family, if his instincts are going to kick in, because they're obviously going after Donald Trump Jr. right now, bringing him, looking at the finances. And, you know, at this point, a grand jury is going to have to see tangible evidence, something that the American public has not been able to see. It's always been 17 agencies have agreed that Russians were involved, but nobody's actually been able to give us any tangible evidence us, the voter, needs to see. And there's a lot of mistrust right now of government, mistrust of the DOJ and how they've handled this case so far.
The president's lawyers seem to sort of say, well, look, we not like this, but this may be a way of bringing this to an an end, and anything that will expedite this and perhaps bring an end to the whole process without anything happening to the president could be a good thing. Is that how you see it as well? Do you see this grand jury convening actually perhaps being a plus in the long term?
Well, that is Mueller's track record with all the cases. Anything he's ever done, it's always go in, go quick, and get it done, get some sort of result, whether yay or nay. I think we need that on behalf of the American public who wants to move on from it. The majority of people are not paying attention to this Russia scandal unless you're political hacks like you and I who are following it. The majority of people are saying, how does this affect my bottom line? I think it's more of a conversation to have about the failing health care plan that happened last week than about Russia, is what majority of people are talking about at the water coolers. I mean, Russia's become the ultimate tagline and joke right now amongst Main Street Americans who are going, let's just blame the Russians for everything. We did just issue sanctions against Russia this week. In fact, they pushed back on President Trump, saying that President Trump had been used for that.
When the president issued his statement to go along with signing that, he was critical of Congress, not of Vladimir Putin. Why is he never criticizing Russia? It becomes quite glaring after a while. He never says anything bad about Putin, and he rarely says anything bad about Russia.
Well, he does talk.
It raises questions in people's minds.
So how does it help if the president comes out and absolutely just blasts President Putin right now? Here's the deal.
Well, because he's kicking almost 800 people of our diplomats out of his country.
Well, absolutely, but there's a bigger issue that we're dealing with is North Korea. And when you're dealing with Russia and China and the relationships that we're dealing with those two, because that's going to be the only way.
That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about Russia.
But Russia is a big part of dealing with North Korea. That's going to be the only ways. If we're going to be able to do this diplomatic and not have to have a military solution to North Korea, it's going to have to involve Russia and China's influence as well. And I think that's right now why he is not personally calling out another president, rather calling out the practices of that country and what they did. But here's the interesting part of this. Do you really think that Russia had influenced one person's vote when they went to that voting booth? Do you really think that that was the reason why Trump won? And I can answer it. No, absolutely not.
But being involved in the election doesn't mean you necessarily change the results.
Then tell that to the long history that America has had in getting involved in other elections, including the Russian election, including Israel. 52 different elections the United States have gotten involved in, our government has gotten involved in the past, and yet we don't hear the cry that we've had for our own. So, you know what? This is the pot calling the kettle black if we're going to start bringing out Russian interference. The question is, was there a difference between collusion and did it actually have did it have a dramatic result and influence on our election? Absolutely not.
Scottie Nell Hughes is our guest. She's a Republican political analyst. We're talking about what's going on in Washington. We'll be talking about what's going on in Tennessee. We talked a little bit about that in the first block. The governor's race next year. Back to continue our conversation with Scottie after this break.